One of the most interesting environmental phenomena that occurs on the continent of Africa has to do with Mount Kilimanjaro. Standing about 6,000 meters high, Mount Kilimanjaro is the fourth tallest mountain in the world and is actually the largest mountain range on the continent of Africa.
Now, located in Tanzania, more specifically, Mount Kilimanjaro is about 3.076 degrees south and 37.35 degrees east. It's really a three mountain complex. The first one, the biggest one, which is what is mostly focused on and what we're going to focus mostly on today, is called Kibo, and the other two are called Shira and Mwenzi. In case our drawing wasn't lifelike enough for you, here's what Mount Kilimanjaro actually looks like. Pay close attention to the ice caps on top of the mountain range.
One of the most interesting phenomena that relates to Mount Kilimanjaro has to do with the ice caps. Now, at the top of the mountain, the elevation is high enough that it gets cold enough for ice caps to form. And as the global temperature rises and increases due to climate change, some of the ice caps begin to melt. And what this does is it initiates a positive feedback loop. So because the ice caps are white, they have a very high albedo, which means that they reflect a lot of the sun's rays. Now, when it starts to melt, it reflects fewer of the sun's rays and therefore absorbs more heat, which makes it melt more, which means that it reflects even less of the sun's rays and heats even more. And this is a big problem because right now, Kibo has lost almost all of its ice caps, and this has disastrous consequences for the ecosystem around Mount Kilimanjaro.
Normally, in the spring, the glaciers melt and fill the aquifers to fuel the ecosystem at the base of the mountain. However, as the ice caps shrink, every spring there's less and less water. This is detrimental to the ecosystem for obvious reasons. Now, one of the key issues with not having enough water is the 1.5 million people who live in a predominantly agrarian society at the base of the mountain. As they run out of water and have therefore less crop yield and not as good crops, what they do is they expand their farming land so they can just get more land, more crops, opposed to the bigger and more plentiful crops in the land they already had. So what this does is it cuts into the land that's already being used by animals and creates a large and serious case of habitat fragmentation, which confines animals to smaller bits of land. Because the ice caps are shrinking, there is a water shortage throughout the entire ecosystem at the base of the mountain. Where there is a water shortage, there is a plant shortage because plants can't get the water they need to grow. Where there is a plant shortage, there are animals who are no longer getting the food they need. Animals now both have a food shortage and a water shortage, on top of the farmers causing them to be confined to certain areas and to experience habitat fragmentation. Now, all three of these things combined lead to an unstable ecosystem which is susceptible to a trophic cascade. What a trophic cascade is when you take one species of life out from an ecosystem, the populations and well-being of all of the other species of life throughout that ecosystem become askew.
An interesting phenomenon related to Mount Kilimanjaro is the story of how it formed. Now, it's the story not only of how Mount Kilimanjaro formed, but about how the Great Rift Valley in Africa formed. What you had two tectonic plates separate from one another, and the second tectonic plate simultaneously collided with a third tectonic plate. Now, the separation of these two plates resulted in the Great Rift Valley, and then the collision of these two plates resulted in Mount Kilimanjaro, because as the plates collided, they pushed up the earth and created the mountain. But what's interesting is that all the friction and pressure and heat associated with the collision of these two tectonic plates has made Mount Kilimanjaro volcanically active. And it still is volcanically active, actually. All three peaks will occasionally smoke due to volcanic activity. Another great reason why Mount Kilimanjaro is a great destination for an Apes Class field trip is that it is the tallest walkable mountain in the world. So you don't need to be a mountaineer to enjoy all of its interesting features.